Hi everyone, welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I'm your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you're joining us from Facebook, subscribe there now, follow us. I'll wait. If you want to see information about managing your money and content showing up in your newsfeed, because now is the time we need to learn about your money, smash that subscribe button and continue seeing our content. So today we're discussing somewhat of a heavy conversation, but that's okay. I believe that our guest is fully equipped to share information. We're going to talk about elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. She's an attorney at law and an ACCA qualified accountant. She's been practicing law for over a decade. Presently, she's the chairperson of the legal committee of the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. She also advises RBC on legal issues throughout the Caribbean arising in the retail, business, and corporate lines of businesses in banking. Apart from her professional duties, she's a wife and mother of a precarious, vivacious toddler, and she loves to spend time with her family and traveling. So I think we have a few things in common. Let's just bring it in. Nicole-Anna, hi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Pauline, and good morning to all the viewers and participants in this session.
Okay.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. And as I mentioned earlier, this is uncomfortable conversations. A lot of us try to run away as far as possible from them. But if there's one thing, there's a fact in life that none of us can run away from, is getting old. I mean, we could throw some dye in our hair. We can, do as much as we can, but ultimately getting old is a fact of life. So when it comes to in that space, why is it important for us to understand what a power of attorney is?
That's an excellent question, and I'm just going to take you up on one point. Getting old is a privilege, and it really is a privilege that most of us would like to strive to. And in terms of powers of attorney, you find that sometimes our senior citizens or elderly persons may grant a power of attorney to a person to act on their behalf. And essentially what a power of attorney is a legal instrument which allows a person to act on another person's behalf. And the power of attorney usually sets out what is the authority the person possesses. So it would say whether the person is able to make deposits, whether the person is able to make withdrawals, whether the person is able to make investments on behalf of the elderly person. And usually it is a registered power of attorney, particularly in our jurisdiction. So why it is an issue, particularly from the banking perspective, is that it can sometimes be used as a vehicle for elder financial abuse. And sitting as the chair of the legal committee, sitting as a banker, sitting as someone who works in the banking industry and provides advice in relation to these matters, I really think it is important for us to have this type of conversation. I think that it is important for the public to be aware of the issues arising in relation to the use of powers of attorney, particularly for elders, and to really generate an environment where all persons, including our senior citizens, feel comfortable to raise an issue where they see, their power of attorney that they may have been granted to somebody else, appointing somebody else to act on their behalf, is being misused. So really and truly kudos to BAT for creating this environment and sensitizing the public.
And when it comes to this conversation around assigning a power of attorney, at what age are we having that conversation? Because I've had a very difficult and annoying conversation with my parents about how, will, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about a will. But I had that conversation with them, but then in hindsight, I'm like, I don't even have one. So what is, a conversation that you're going to have in your 30s, 40s, that you're going to have this power of attorney conversation?
Well, the power of attorney conversation is not a necessary conversation for everyone to undertake. Really and truly, a power of attorney is when you want someone to act on your behalf, but it's not necessary that you have a power of attorney. So the power of attorney is more of appointing someone almost as your agent to do things on your behalf, perhaps if you're out of the country, and that is for an elderly person, that is for a younger person. It really is not limited to use by elderly persons. And I think I'm going to digress from the topic a little bit and say kudos to you, Pauline, for having the conversation with your parents in relation to, creating a will, ensuring that they crystallize on paper what are their wishes when they pass on. But the power of attorney is most relevant when persons are alive. When a person dies who would have granted a power of attorney, essentially the power of attorney dies with that person. The person appointed under the power of attorney is no longer granted the authority to act on behalf of the donor. So you'll hear me say donor and donee from time to time, and a donor is the person who grants the power of attorney. So it's almost like donation of blood. And the donee is the person who has the authority to act on the other person's behalf. So the power of attorney conversation is a little different from the creation of a will, but certainly they're all aligned in terms of ensuring that the person who grants the instrument, their best interests are being represented, both during life and at death.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
So when it comes to responsibility of power of attorney, what does that actually mean? Because, it's one thing to say, okay, you can go cash a check on my behalf. But what are the key 3 points that we should understand when it comes to that phrase, power of attorney?
Sure. So the key 3 points I think that we should zero in on in any discussion surrounding a power of attorney is: what is the person who granted the power? What do they intend for you as the person who has the power to do on their behalf? Usually, the power of attorney would be specific in terms of the authorities that that person has, or in some instances, it may be general. So you have a general power of attorney outlining, okay, this person is allowed to act on my behalf, a general statement. And there are sometimes specific authorities included in a power of attorney. So you try to limit it in terms of time, in terms of the actions that you can take. So those are the 2 main areas, I would say, that you think about when looking at a power of attorney: the authorities allowed, and what is the person's best interests, and ensuring that you are representing their best interests in all actions that you do. The third point or factor that I think you should take into account when looking at a power of attorney is whether it is in fact valid. So, as you rightly said, Pauline, looking at the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, or laws in general, looking at legal instruments from time to time, even powers of attorney, you may be looking at it and you may think to yourself, is this English? Do I understand everything that is being written, or everything that is written in the power of attorney? And that's unfortunate, it really is unfortunate that sometimes the powers of attorney are so convoluted that the person who grants the power may not be aware of each and every aspect of the authorities that they would have granted to the other person. So in terms of looking at the validity of the power of attorney, we would consider from a legal perspective whether the person who granted the power of attorney is still mentally capable, whether the person who has the authority to act on the donor's behalf, is still mentally capable, whether any of the persons listed in the power of attorney, whether donor or donee, whether they have passed on and someone else is attempting to act on behalf of the person appointed via the power of attorney. All of those factors go into considering whether this power of attorney is still valid in Trinidad and Tobago. So I think that is also an important consideration when looking at powers of attorney. The interest of the person granting the power of attorney, whether the language in the power of attorney is general or specific, what are the specific authorities granted to the attorney or the donee appointed by the power of attorney, and whether it's still valid.
You mentioned something there about Trinidad and Tobago laws, and funny enough, we do have a comment in our YouTube channel. By the way, guys, we are on YouTube, so you can follow us there if somebody's not on Facebook or LinkedIn. And one was asking for their daughter to act on their behalf because there was an account, some mix-up that she wanted. I don't know exactly what she wanted to do, but she was asking what can she do to get her daughter to act on her behalf for this transaction in the bank. Now she's in the States. What exactly in terms of their options does that person have?
Well, there are quite a few options for that person. And first of all, I'm going to put that little legal caveat that all lawyers say that this is not constituting legal advice. But certainly in terms of guiding that type of discussion and encouraging that user or person attending this session to seek further legal advice, what I would say is a power of attorney is an option once it is created in accordance with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. It can be used within our jurisdiction. So what I would suggest that person do is contact an attorney at law, ensure that they are very clear in terms of what is the authority they would like their daughter to, exercise in terms of clearing up a transaction on their account, and ask or seek guidance from the attorney as to whether, a power of attorney can be created, or whether, it may be an instance where that person may want to contact the bank directly to find out if written instructions that are notarized because the person is abroad would suffice to allow the person to act on their behalf. So there are options, and as a member of the banking community, I must put forward the notion that we also have digital banking. So it is an option that I would encourage all to exercise, to sign up for digital banking, because it may be, as our user is abroad, you can sign in and log into the digital banking app. You can send a secured message to the bank requesting whatever clarification or solution to an issue that you have, and there may be no need for your daughter to act on your behalf. So that is also an option that I just wanted to highlight.
Welcome back to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I am your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you're joining us from YouTube, and I see you, Jonathan, you have a question, don't worry, we got you. We'll ask Nicole-Anna that just now. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button and continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. She's a power of attorney. I've said that so many times. She's an attorney at law and an ACCA qualified accountant. She has been practicing law for over a decade, and we want to bring her in because, as I mentioned earlier, them lawyer fees. Because if we get in this free, guys, let's squeeze as much as we can from Nicole-Anna today, right? All right, so we've been through the conversation around power of attorney, what it is, what it means. But before we move on, I want to make sure and ask this question from Jonathan Jones. Could I pass on my power of attorney authority due? I'm not sure exactly. Does that as a technical term?
Well, I am not certain if that question is complete, but permit me to make some assumptions and perhaps our user could just clarify that I'm on the right track in terms of the question. Perhaps what is being asked is whether the power of attorney authority can pass on subsequent to the person who grants the power of attorney dying. And if this is the correct interpretation of the question, I would say no, in direct response to that interpretation of the question. It's once the donor or the person who grants the power of attorney dies, your power of attorney is no longer valid. So at that point, that is where we get into the administration of estates, the distribution of assets, and really the conversation that you would have been having with your parents, Pauline, in terms of ensuring that you have a will so that an executor could be appointed through a grant of probate being issued by the court. So once you pass on, the power of attorney is no longer valid. I'm hopeful that I would have interpreted that question correctly, but I stand to correction.
Yes, you
Thank
did.
you. Thank you very
Jonathan,
much.
he went into the comments and you got it. You have it. Start with the question: how do we start the conversation around the need for power of attorney with parents or elders who may not be ready to put such protections in place? And I feel this question to my soul. So Nicole-Anna, please help us help our parents.
Well, I think we all want to be in a position to help our parents. But sometimes it may be that our parents don't necessarily need the help at this point. So let's start the conversation with ensuring that you are having conversations with your parent, keeping in touch, keeping the lines of communication open. And when you start hearing your parents complaining about not being able to understand a particular transaction, not being able to attend the bank physically because they have particular ailments, then it may be an important discussion to have if there is a need for power of attorney. Now, there are other channels through which your parents can access their banking information and transactions. So it may be that we don't need to use the power of attorney to be able to assist our parents. And I think that is one of the things that I want persons to lead this session with. Powers of attorney were very relevant and very, very popular when we had more paper-based transactions happening. But as we move towards digital banking and digitizing and using e-commerce, I think it's important for our parents to know how to use these different channels. And it doesn't take a power of attorney for us to introduce our parents to the digital banking app, to ensure that they understand what's happening, to help them if there's an update to the digital banking app. What I think brings in the conversation of elder financial abuse is where persons who are placed in a position of trust, placed in a position of authority, abuse that authority in terms of, trying to access, your parents' account, and it may not be you. It may not be you, but it may be a caregiver of your parent. So it is important, I think, to come away from this conversation not only focusing on the use of powers of attorney, but focusing on broadening the perspective in terms of how do we help our parents continue to be financially literate, continue to be aware of what's happening with their finances, to continue to have the discussions, because at certain ages and stages you don't really want to talk about your entire account balance with your entire community of care, and you are entitled to do that. You're entitled as a mature person, a person in the mature population, or any really person existing in society, to make the decision that you want to keep your financial information private or within a very small community. And with that notion, it's important to be able to track what's happening with your finances. So powers of attorney were good and still remain good in certain circumstances, but there are so many options that are available to us and to our elderly persons now that could bring so much convenience, that could keep us in the know, that I think we have to broaden the conversation away from powers of attorney with our parents and ask our parents, when last you logged into your digital banking app? If you have a joint account with your parents, which you have access to the runnings of their transactions, asking them, you saw this charge that happened on Saturday. What you know about this charge? And to just bring that conversation and sensitization to our parents to ensure that they are not being placed in a vulnerable position. That's what I am hopeful that people take away from this conversation. We have more options. Let's exercise them.
Thanks for that, Nicole-Anna. What I'm hearing, though, Adana, is what she's telling us is we have to be patient with them when we put out HTTPS and they're typing out the URL. We just need to breathe because they're learning.
Pauline, let me just say one thing. And this is a very candid conversation among everyone on this session. I was late to the game to digital banking, and truly, as I entered the banking industry, I was still going into the banking halls, enjoying my conversations with all the banking staff, spending many hours, and really not getting not being efficient. And it is through the intervention of my husband, who said, it is time for you to get the digital banking app, that I have changed my ways and I have seen the improvement, particularly during COVID. Being able to pay all my bills, pay the hairdresser, pay for services at home. I mean, if I transpose that to our mature members of the mature population, not having to go into the bank to cash a check, but being able to deposit the check through the ATM, being able to monitor my balance just from my phone or my tablet or my iPad. These things are here for us to use. We don't necessarily need the power of attorney to ask somebody to act on our behalf, to go into the branch, to be able to go and do transactions on our behalf when we have the digital banking access. So let us be patient with our parents and patient with ourselves, because I was a part of that population, and I can attest to the efficiency that it has brought to my life. And I'm not saying that it's not important to continue to maintain your relationship with the bank as a customer. It's not important. I'm not saying that you may not have to come to the bank from time to time, but I am saying that there are other channels. Be open to using the other channels. And as children, and not only as children, but as persons who have the skills and the ability to assist other persons, including members of the mature population, to bring them into the fold of digital banking and having that convenience. I encourage all of us to be patient, because I know that my husband exercised great patience in assisting me with digital banking. So that's my little tidbit.
Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I am your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you're joining us from LinkedIn, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. She's an attorney at law and an ACCA qualified accountant, and she's been practicing law for over a decade. She's also the chairperson of the legal committee of the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. So let's bring in Nicole-Anna, because we have quite a number of questions in the comments. Just a FYI, Adana says, thank you so much. You did respond to her question as it relates to when you have the conversation about power of attorney with the parents. And if you missed that response, don't worry, once this live is over, you can replay it, as well as you can share this video on your newsfeed. So, maybe indirectly tell your parents, hey, watch this video. You can tag them, it's fine. So going into the comment section, and City is asking, is there a recommended age or signs for power of attorney to be implemented?
Well, first of all, I would say there is no recommended age or signs. It is more situational. So if it is a situation where there is a need for someone to be appointed to act on behalf of an elderly person, then a power of attorney is an option. What we must always consider is the mental capacity of the person granting the power of attorney. So it's a difficult conversation to have. It is a difficult topic to address, but mental health issues really transcend our operation as a society. So if the elderly person or the senior citizen who is granting the power of attorney is not mentally capable to handle their financial affairs, a power of attorney is not an option. In that instance, a more appropriate option is to go before the court and have a court order be issued appointing someone to act on behalf of that elderly person. So that's the first step. Once the elderly person has the mental capacity to act on their behalf in terms of their financial affairs, the power of attorney is open for use. I would suggest that the power of attorney outlines specifically what are the authorities that the person who is being appointed via the power of attorney, what they are able to do, whether they are able to deposit and withdraw but nothing else, or whether they are able to have ATMs, digital banking access, etc. All of those things should be itemized in the power of attorney. It is an option as well to limit the power of attorney to a specific time period, so it can state specifically that it's going to be terminated on X date, whether it's July 1st, 2022 or another date. Or it can be general and have no limitations in terms of time. But once we all know that the power of attorney ceases to be valid once the person who grants the power of attorney revokes it, or the person who grants the power of attorney dies, or the person who grants the power of attorney becomes mentally incapable, or the same factors applies to the person who has that power of attorney. So I wouldn't say that it is dependent on an age or stage, but it's more of a situation. If they are just not able to attend the bank and transact on their behalf due to being out of the country or physical limitations, but they still have the mental capacity to do it. So I hope I answered that question.
How do banks protect against abuse in the form of misuse?
In the form of misuse of the power of attorney,
yes,
is what I'm gathering from the question. So insofar as the misuse of the power of attorney, what we try to do as a bank, particularly when the power of attorney is very general, is we try to have that verification. Now, each bank has their own policies in terms of how they treat with powers of attorney, but generally the experience should be that there's verification with the client to ensure that the authority that the person who is coming into the banking halls trying to transact on behalf of our client, it is within their authority to do so. So that verification process may take the form of a phone call, may take the form of the bank asking for specific written instructions from the donor, our client, confirming that we can go ahead with this transaction. It may take the form of an email depending on the banking policies, but there should be follow-up steps to ensure that we verify that there's the authority to act based on this person who is appointed by the power of attorney coming in and giving us instructions. Because really, what I would like everyone to take away is that persons appointed via power of attorney, so when our client provides a power of attorney to another person to act on their behalf, what we rarely see is a faceless representation of our client. And if we find or if we note that that person is asking us to do a transaction that is not in our client's best interest, we have a duty as a bank to really ask a little more questions. You know, we are put on caution, and we really try to ask or find out whether our client has authorized this transaction. And I know that it may be a little frustrating from the client's perspective because it may delay your transaction. It may, we may not be able to contact you at a particular point in time, so we may have to come back to you and clarify the point. And you may be thinking, well, I have a power of attorney. Why is the bank asking me all these questions? But we want to ensure that your best interests are being maintained. So that is one of the ways we try to do it.
Well, thank you so much on that note, Nicole-Anna de Silva, for joining us today and sharing insight into elder financial abuse and power of attorney, why seniors are at risk. Sign up to be notified about our next live show in the link in the comments below. And as always, be sure to like and follow our page on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook so you never miss a single live show. Thanks again for joining us and have a great day. Bye.